other ones.
All right. I think we are live. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see folks. I'm not sure where you're tuning in from, but hi, I'm Beth Pratt with the National Wildlife Federation, and I'm coming to you from outside Yosemite. It is a beautiful sunny day, actually, which isn't good. We need more water here. And you are in for just a delightful time today. I get to spend an hour with someone I don't get to spend enough time with, my good friend, Bill Leikam. He is someone who I just am in awe of and who inspires me. I wrote in one of my books that he's the Jane Goodall of the fox world. And he is. He really has shed from his diligent and daily observations of urban gray foxes light on their behavior that we have not known before. So get ready for a wonderful hour here with Bill. Just some logistics before we get to that. Again, we'll be happy to take your questions. Just put them in the comments or comments. If you have a fox story, you can also put them in the comment section and we'll sort of moderate those throughout. Sorry, we can't, be in person together, but we're still in this kind of virtual world. But be sure to either put comments or stories or questions in there, and then I'll make sure Bill sees them. And then if you're having technical difficulties, sometimes just logging in and out of Facebook again helps, but feel free to put those in the comments as well. And want to say thank you to Tony, who with Humanity Communications Collective, could not do it without them and her. She's behind the scenes running the show. So again, if you are having any issues, can't hear, just comment and she'll make sure everything's good on our end. So anyway, thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. Let me turn it over to Bill. Bill, it's great to see you. We haven't seen each other in person for a while, but I'm kind of want to start this off. I mean, I want to talk about your background, and I have lots of questions about how you got interested in gray foxes, but I almost want to cut to celebration because as long as I've known you, and it's been almost a decade now, you've wanted to write a book on the foxes and you did it. Here it is. How does it feel?
Well, that book took me on a journey. I'll have to say that, because it got to a point where I was I was moving in a direction with it, okay, and then the book took over, or the foxes took over. I'm not sure which one. and it I struggled with it to try to keep it back on course, but it didn't work quite that way. However, when I submitted it to D'Angelo, they saw the story, okay, and I had pared it down and I had moved it forward more than it had been. That's why it took so long to get to this point. And I said, it's got to go. With a lot of my writing, I could spend eons rewriting and polishing, but you come to a point where you say, okay, that's enough, and you say, and you get it out there to a publisher or wherever it's going to go, and that's what happened with this one.
Yay! Well, it's great to see it in print, and having read some early versions and actually hearing a lot of what's in the book from you, I'm just delighted. And for those of you who are interested in really learning you're spending days with Bill and these foxes in this book and learning about especially gray fox behavior. I can't recommend it enough. D'Angelo Publications, who happens to be a friend of mine, hi Sequoia and team. You can buy it on their site. Tony, if you want to throw the link in for folks, it's also available on Amazon. But of course, if you support small business, you can order it directly from D'Angelo Publications. But that's one of the things we're celebrating today with Bill, is the publication of his new book. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it. But Bill, for those who don't know you, I guess what I want to start out with is, one of the things I love about your story is you're a teacher. You're not somebody who, has been a researcher for 30 years, or who started out on that career path. And yet you're doing all this groundbreaking work. But let's back up to what got you interested into the foxes. How did you become the fox guy? Because it's not like it was your career.
Yeah, no, it wasn't at all. The way that happened was that I retired from teaching. Well, I hate that word retire. I never retire from anything. I just change hats and I go from one to the other. And so back in the mid 2000s, in 2005, I dropped out of teaching and I was president of a small high tech startup. And as such, I saw that we weren't going to be able to get the traction we needed because YouTube was in the scene and YouTube had the money and we didn't. And so I resigned from that position and went on to develop a kitchen utensil. And in the process of that kitchen utensil, I also started birding. And so I went to the Baylands and I fell in love with Bullock's Orioles. And I happened to find a eucalyptus tree where every day I came there were Bullock's Orioles in that tree, and I could get some really good pictures of them, photos, digital photos. And so anyway, one morning I'm coming down the road. I'm trespassing on city property too, and into a construction area, and that's taboo. But I snuck through that area, and I came around the turn in the road, and I looked ahead of me down toward the gate, and my God, there was a gray fox. I didn't know it was a gray fox at that moment. It was a fox. I knew that. And it was sitting there beside the road, just on the other side of this steel gate. And I went, whoa. And so I took my camera was click, click, and I walked toward this little animal sitting there. It just watched me come up to it, toward it. And I got all the way to the gate, and it wasn't more than maybe 15, 20 feet away. And it just simply stood up, turned around, and walked back into the brush. And I thought, whoa, I had not seen a fox since I was a kid of 14 years old. Back then, I lived on the Corralitos Creek in Watsonville, or actually in Freedom, California. And that's where I encountered my first foxes. And so this was a revisitation, if you will, of the foxes. Okay, so I'm like stunned to see a fox in the area. I came back the next day, looked around, checked, tried to find foxes, no foxes. Third day, I come down into that same area on the road there, and lo be over there and under the brush, on the edge of the brush, there are these foxes, 3, and I could tell they were young foxes. They were playing. And when I came up, they stopped their play and they looked at me. I sat down on the road across from them and I just sat there and observed. They watched me as I watched them. And that was the opening salvo for uh, a 12-year journey into the lives of the gray fox. Now, I have to say this. I was so fortunate to come across that family of foxes because that was a stable gathering family of foxes year after year after year. I only found that out later, right? But that's what happened. And then I began to expand my territory, and I went over to a local creek nearby, and I found scat on the overflow channel of that creek, and I I started to move my operations over there as well. And that's when I came upon an enclave of 14 gray foxes, some of them paired up, some of them not. And what I'm trying to say is that with that number of gray foxes present, I was so fortunate to be able to enter into their world and observe them. They came to trust me, and so I just come into their world and I'd sit there and I'd document what they were doing. And they grew comfortable with me doing that. If I hadn't had so many in one location, it would have taken me a lot longer to be able to pull together what I have pulled together in that book, The Road to Fox Hollow.
Yep. No, it's a good point. And just to set the stage for those of you tuning in, we're talking about a really urban population of foxes. I've walked that with Bill a couple times, and they are in some respects that sort of corridor area is 2 feet with a chain link fence in some areas. So this is a really urban area for foxes or any wildlife to live in. As out there in the audience, and as Bill knows, for me, there is something magical about this wildlife that is eking it out even in these improbable places, whether it be P22 or these gray foxes that Bill's studying. Tony, can you pop up just so people see one of these cute foxes, just any of those cute photos Bill provided us so people can see? There we go. And the other thing we get from Bill is incredible fox photos that he's taken over the years, which is amazing. And again, he will get into some of these characters that he's talked about because he does know them as individuals. But Bill, can you talk a little bit about, I think one thing that's interesting, obviously gray foxes, irresistible, but what are you observing that may be different than a gray fox that lives, out in the middle of nowhere, like near Yosemite, and foxes that you're seeing in this highly urbanized, we're talking right in the middle of Silicon Valley with freeways and, you name it. So, that to me is some of the groundbreaking stuff you're doing, is that you are seeing they are behaving differently than maybe their rural counterparts, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, out, let's say in the Santa Cruz Mountains out there, unless you have trail cameras posted, you're not going to see a gray fox. The chances of it are tiny. But in the urbanized areas, then they have a limited ability. See, one of the things I need to explain is that the gray fox is a bush dog. They love bushes, brush, etc., riparian habitat. Whereas the red fox likes open spaces, and it shows in their genetic evolution, because the red fox has long legs to handle the grassy open areas. The gray fox has short, little stubby to be able to handle the brush. Okay, so there's that kind of a distinction there.
And Bill, can you just real quickly, Christine Cook had a good question for those who don't know. What's the main difference, building on that, between gray and red foxes? Aside from habitat, there's a couple other differences, correct? And I'd say the biggest one in California is almost all of our native foxes are gray. We do have like the Sierra Nevada red fox, but anyway, Bill, are any other differences for Christine between gray and red foxes?
Well, maybe it's time to bring this up. There were some genetic studies done several years ago at UC Davis. And one of the findings was that the gray fox is what we call the basal canid. Okay, it's the origins of all other canids, all other dog-like critters out there. And the age span runs back to between 8 and 12 million years. Okay, now that's older than any other canine in the world.
Wow.
And then to add to that, if you see a gray fox, because they cannot interbreed with any other canine, they're Eurasian, and the red fox is Vulpes vulpes. They can't interbreed. So when you're seeing a gray fox, you're looking at a genetic replica going back 10 million years, unchanged,
Wow.
unchanged
Wow.
for all that period of time. And so when I came upon that information, I went, whoa, now that is impressive. So all the other, as I said, all the other canines are youngsters compared to that gray fox.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. I mean, to think you're looking that far back in time. I have gray foxes in my yard, so just to think about that, that's astounding. Another fact, Christine, that I love is gray foxes can climb. Red foxes cannot, and
Yeah.
that makes them a bit endearing to us. I think because they can display some antics climbing a tree or climbing up the roof of a house or something. I think is pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, they use in the urban environment, they use fences to travel from one neighbor to another neighbor, up on the roof and over and down onto the cars and through. And they travel right through your neighborhood.
My parents have a grape arbor that they will climb up and eat the grapes off of. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah. Bill, I want to talk a little bit about when we first met because it's kind of a fun story.
yeah.
Tony, can you put up that photo of Bill and I? I dug up the photo of I think this is actually when we first met or very close to it. There we are on the Facebook campus. Remember that, Bill?
Yeah, yeah, sure do.
So, for those of you who don't know, and Tony, do you want to throw up the Facebook Fox photo? Yeah, there we go. So the Facebook campus in Palo Alto has some, or did have, I think they still do have,
Yeah,
some of Bill's foxes there. And we got to visit the campus, and I see why the foxes want to live there because I want to live there. It was really cool. And I don't know if Alexis is tuning in, but this wonderful woman who worked for Facebook at the time. I hope you're tuning in, Alexis. She actually the messenger, the little foxes in your messenger are the Facebook foxes, and she spearheaded that. But what I loved about Facebook, and even Mark Zuckerberg got involved at the time, is they weren't like, oh, let's get rid of these guys. They're like, can we keep them? And they brought Bill in to sort of talk about how Facebook could coexist with these foxes, which they do to this day, Bill. But do you want to talk about that?
yeah,
That was
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I first was contacted to give some advice on the foxes, it was how do we get these foxes out of here?
Oh, so they first wanted them.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because there were some of the employees were afraid of the foxes, afraid that they might bite them, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so I said, well, I should come over there and take a look and see what your situation is. Turns out that the pair of foxes had pups under the walkway, and so you have a pair of foxes that have claimed a natal den area, and you're in for not moving them anywhere. They're not going to go. And so I just simply said to that small group of people who first led me through that Facebook campus, I said, you ought to make these foxes an asset. And bingo, that's what happened. The Facebook foxes they have their own Facebook page. And since that time, they have expanded their campus to a new section along Highway 85, and on top of that new complex is a forest. Okay, it's full grown trees, brush, pathways leading through it. All it's. I stepped off that elevator into that world, and I said, "Whoa, this is ideal fox country." And the foxes had made their way up onto that roof. Now, at that point in time, it was uh, under construction. And so the question became, how did they get up here? And one of the facilities managers said, well, at that time that was in March, we had big ladders leaning up against the walls uh, of the building. And he said, I'll bet they just climbed right up the ladder. And I said, yeah, they can do that because I've seen them climb ladders before. Climbed up the ladder, they got to the top of the ladder, and they jumped off into this wooded landscape out there. And you know, they needed a safe place to have their pups. And that first pair of foxes, she was already pregnant because she was going to have those pups in April. And so the pair had to find a den, and they chose the roof up there. And
That is awesome.
They've been there ever since. It's not the same pair though, but they do populate that place because it's safe. No predators, no cars, nothing to worry about. They have plenty of food. And so nowadays they come and go by way of the fire escape.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and if you don't, the Facebook Fox page, I mean, the stuff you're talking about, Bill, I love, the photos that get posted when they do. And again, thank you, Alexis, for just being such a champion when you worked at Facebook for them. But yeah, I mean, all manner of antics and using human structures. And that gets me to Nancy. Thanks for commenting, Nancy, about, in other words, habitat is not something only found in remote wilderness areas. And I think that that's something both Bill and I work very much to promote. That in for me, it was a career transformation. I've worked in places like Yosemite, and I live outside Yosemite, and Yellowstone. And by the way, happy birthday to Yellowstone. It's the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone today. But both Bill and I spend a lot of our time saying, wait a minute, our human spaces is habitat as well. And indeed, we need to be doing more in our human spaces for the future of wildlife, to ensure that they can remain and can share our spaces. And I think that's one thing that the Facebook foxes, or any of the foxes that Bill writes about, really shows, that they are willing to adapt. It's usually us who can't. And Bill,
Right.
can you talk about some of the challenges you're having? I mean, these foxes, although they've had some bouts with disease that have wiped them out, obviously they have to face an urban interface that can be challenging. What are some of the things you would like to see happen to ensure that they remain and can be successful?
Well, first of all, the environment out there is a patchwork of habitat. Okay, and most of it is so limited that it is dysfunctional. And so one of the main projects that the Urban Wildlife Research Project is doing now, we're preparing to knit together linkages between these patches of wildlife habitat so that they can get from A to B to C to D with ease and undercover, and they're not exposed to the outside. So we're gonna we're in the process of establishing a project that will go connections will go from the Facebook campus down south all the way to Moffett Field. Right now, that span is what we need to refurbish and put back together. But there's an issue here too. We are facing rising sea levels, and here we are right along the edge of the San Francisco Bay. Okay, now as the sea level rises, and it's rising faster than we ever anticipated, as that happens, the the places where I now have habitat operate, in place, is going to be underwater. Where are the foxes going to go? Where are the raccoons going to go? The possums, the skunks, and etc. Well, the only place they could go is into backyards. They're going to be pushed into deeper into the urban environment. And if you ever have seen any of the interactive maps that show different degrees of sea level rise, sometimes that's going to push those corridors and those passageways way into the cities. So we gotta look at the interaction between sea level rise and habitat and healthy climates, healthy areas for them.
It's a good point. I mean, climate is just playing out, almost everywhere for both obviously people, but wildlife too. And I think that's a good point that, sea level rise for coastal species is a big deal because it is going to displace them in coastal areas, much like Silicon Valley, or at least, the Palo Alto Baylands and stuff like that. There is going to be a lot of displacement. That is something that we're going to have to tackle. So again, getting back to coexisting, right? How can we make room in our human spaces? And it's not all that hard to coexist with a fox, right, Bill? I mean, these are not animals that are a safety risk. They might steal something out of your orchard, but I think for the most part, we can coexist pretty easily with foxes, just being responsible on our side for making sure they are successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. This is not part of the book, but about 3 years ago now, I was contacted by a woman who had gray foxes in her backyard. And so she invited me to come over and take a look at what was going on. As it turned out, the foxes weren't just in her backyard, they were in the neighborhood. At night, some of the people reported driving down the street and a fox running alongside of them. Well, this is in the middle of Saratoga. I mean, there's nothing but houses all around that area. And here are these, I don't know how many foxes there were, but quite a number of them were living in that neighborhood. And they've since moved out, but they're for a year and a half at least, at night usually, but they're crepuscular is what we call them. So they have daylight hours on before sunset and before sunrise. And so you can see them, in daylight right there in your backyard. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll come in, and if you have cat food out there, they'll gobble it all up. Don't have any chickens hanging around because they'll make a meal of your chickens too. And so there's some things that people in the urban environment need to consider. How to build a fox-proof fence, a fox-proof cage, because remember, Beth said they could climb, and I've seen them climb chain link fences and go between the barbed wire at the top and come right down the other side. And I have that on video, a fox doing that.
They're pretty crafty, I will say, about moving in spaces. So Bill, let's hear about, I mean, one of the things I find in why I love going out to dinner with you, and it's long overdue, is just hearing about the individual foxes. Like you, again, since you've spent so much time with these animals, you get to know them as individuals, and you write about some of these individuals in the book. So can you tell us, Cute, for example, tell us the story of Cute, or any other foxes you want to share, because that's how you're learning so much about, much like Jane Goodall did with her study animals, just being present daily and learning about what makes each of these animals individuals. But you have some amazing stories of some of this cast of characters. So please share with us some of these individual fox stories.
Well, you brought up the fox Cute. First of all, I've got to tell the audience this.
Okay.
When I first started into this whole thing and documenting them, I really quickly learned that they had different personalities, and I call it foxanalities. Okay. And so I tried at the very beginning to be real scientific about this and give them GF4 as a name, and there's GF3, or there's, to me, that just didn't work. These were individuals.
Right.
They had depth to their personalities.
And that's what's good about science. I'm with you. I mean, science is now showing what we always knew, which is animals are individuals. And I think, we need to stop having this distance, and we can't name them and we can't anthropomorphize. I mean, in some respects, it's back to sort of that Jane Goodall approach, where you're recognizing that you are an animal just like those who you're studying and have a relationship. So I applaud you for going down that route.
And at the same time, along those lines, I at first I put myself in the position of studying the animal, okay, but it soon became obvious to me that they were my teachers. They were my professors, and I was in graduate school. And taking that attitude, I knew I had a lot to learn, So anyway, I want Cute.
That's a great, yeah. Tell the story of Cute.
Yeah. Well, Cute was a young female. She paired up with the region's alpha male, and his name was Dark. Okay, but Cute had this thing about herself. She was what I came to call the dumpster queen. Okay, because she lived along that creek that I mentioned. Right next door to that creek is the Palo Alto maintenance service center, where they keep the trucks running and all kinds of things happen in there. Okay, chain link fence separates the overflow channel from the MSC. She would go up that fence, over the top, down, and out to the dumpsters. And when she'd get to the dumpsters, she'd selectively pull out what she wanted. She'd fill her mouth with all this stuff that she gathered up. She'd come back to the fence, come back and up and over and down and out to the grassy area, where she'd sort them and eat whatever she wanted to take from that. I often had to clean up after her because she had a garbage mess out there. But she was one of the interesting little foxes. One day, it was after a pretty heavy rain, And when it rained like that, there was a channel in the riparian habitat that carried water. Now, foxes don't like to get their paws wet. They will if they have to, but they don't like it. And Cute was the she if she could avoid water, on the over in the anywhere, she would. So here I am. I'm coming to check on some of my trail cameras, and I look back behind me, and there are three foxes following me. One was Big Guy. Big Guy was a young first year fox. Uh, uh, and he was um, his mother was Cute, okay, and his father was Dark. So Cute was following me. Big Guy was following me, and the fox that I call my Buddha dog, she was just so mellow and so smooth in her mood, just in her presence, that I just called her my Buddha. And so what happened was that uh, we came to the channel, the water channel, and I waded off into it, taking the shallow way around, and I got three-quarters of the way across that channel, and I looked back behind me, and the three foxes were lined up at the edge of the water. You know, so you have Big Guy, the young one. He just he stopped and he looked and looked and looked, and then he charged across. Cute looked and looked and looked and looked and anticipated that she could jump from where she was about 10 feet further to a tree that was laying almost parallel to the ground. She gets set, boom, she's off. She rockets across and lands on that tree and is off into, she didn't get her feet wet at all. Here's the last one, my Buddha dog. She is looking over the situation, and she decides to follow where I had gone. She was almost right in step with where I had gone, and she got her feet wet, but she said this is probably the best way to go. What I was looking at were three different foxes using the same challenge, but solving that challenge in three different ways. That to me is thinking, okay? And that relates to the first time I saw a pup laying in the grass, asleep, dreaming. And what that did to me was it pushed me inside the head of that little gray fox. I said, what's going on in that dream? Is that dream like mine when I have a dream at night, full of images and full of this and that, and whatever I am doing? Or is it different? And I came to the point where I decided the only way that I'm going to be able to say anything about this is if I um, use their tools of what I call their tools of perception. See, we use our eyes. We navigate through the world with our eyes. They don't. They navigate through their world with a sense of hearing. It's an auditory world, and it's a olfactory, a nose world. And so I thought, well, maybe that little fox is bringing those two sensations together, maybe an image way in the background somewhere. But to understand its world, it needs to be able to hear, smell, And so I put that all together into a little package and said, uh, what does a sound look like? Or no, sound. What does a sound smell like? There you go. That's more along.
Bill, that's beautiful. I mean, to me, it's about, getting past this very human centric look at life and trying to understand that the way other life perceives and relates to the world is different. And
Yeah.
when we come to that understanding, to me, the world becomes just an even more beautiful place. So I love how you put that. The animal I've been studying the last few years intently is butterflies. And, I mean, just when you start, like you said, looking at how they perceive the world, they're not using sight like us either. Or
Yeah.
so I love the way you put it. And I think that that's not just about science. I think it's for all of us a way coming to that understanding with the wider world around it, whether it be people or wildlife, is what enriches life. So I love the way you put it.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead and talk. But Tony, why don't you run? This is another interaction with a fox. I'd love to have Bill provided us with a great video of a fox with a feral cat. Don't worry, there's nothing graphic about it. But let's watch it, and then Bill will explain what went on.
So it's that fox is Big Eyes, and she is well, as you can see, she was a little bit curious about Blackie, the big black cat out there, and but this is typical interaction between fox and other. Okay, I've never seen I've seen fox to fox fights, but I've never seen a fox fight a raccoon, let's say, for instance, or a possum. Well, I saw something really very interesting on one of my trail cameras, though, having to do with possums. I never knew possums could run really fast, but they can.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So here's coming down the channel is this gray fox running, and behind it is a possum chasing this gray fox. The other gray fox, there are two gray foxes and one possum. The other gray fox is off to the side watching this possum chase its mate, and so the possum decides it can't get to it'll never catch up with this fox, so it turns around and chases the other fox, the second fox. I have that on a file, you know, and it was really quite interesting to see that happen.
That's what to me is so, there's no substitute for being out there, right? I mean,
Right.
we tend to think we can learn about animals or any subject from textbooks, but there's no substitute for being out there and seeing this stuff and seeing these behaviors in person. I mean, I just encourage everybody, in our fast lives, we don't slow down enough. And I think that's part of what you do well, Bill, is slow down and pay attention.
Mhm. You have to.
You have to.
I
Yeah.
want to go back. I want to go back for a moment to this
Sure.
question of animal intelligence.
Go
Uh,
for it.
a lot of the science is using our definition of intelligence, our baseline of what we consider to be intelligent behavior, and we're imposing it upon other critters. Now, some of those other critters are pretty close in terms of the way in which they think, but I caution scientists to don't overlay um, human abilities and go looking for human abilities in other animals, because other animals, other critters, their thinking processes are probably vastly different. Their intelligence is vastly different. We don't even understand it yet.
I'll tell you, octopus, they'd win every time in intelligent contests over me. That's for sure. I mean, yeah, I think that for me and you, I mean, I did have a traditional science training, God, 30 years ago, and it was about, people are the most intelligent. It's this pyramid, and we have to be scientific, and I'm still a big adherent to science. Science is a great way of looking at it, but it's the values we have brought to the scientific research and study of animals which are off, not so much the process. It's that, like you're saying, it's this, we tend to put a very human value system on the animal world where it just has been wrong. And I think what's great is there's been, the whole paradigm has begun to shift in that, which is great, that you're seeing a lot more recognition about animal intelligence and the science around it, whereas even 20 years ago that was kind of shunned. So I think that we are at least seeing new ways of understanding animals happen, which is great, a great outcome. So
Well,
Bill, oh, go ahead. Oh, go
I
ahead.
was going to say that
Mhm.
the kind of science that I'm doing is called ethology, ethology. Okay, and for a long time there, that kind of on the ground direct observation science was shunned.
It really was, yeah.
Yeah, it was looked down upon. You don't do that. There are other ways, and you have to be objective and so forth. Well, that's not going to get you the whole picture.
Right.
And I think the ethological approach. Darwin was an ethologist. Most of all the rest of the scientists that come down into the about the 30s, they were ethologists.
Right.
And then in the 40s, it started to change into this behaviorism and move in it, trying to become objective. Well, yeah, objectivity is needed, because even in my work, I don't necessarily jump to the conclusion if I see an incident happen one time and never again. I have to see it happen, or similar things happen 3, 4, 5 times.
Right.
Before I'll say that's a behavior of the gray fox.
Right. Yep. No,
And
it's true.
one of those behaviors is the fox kiss.
Yes, I wanted to be sure we got to that, and I'm not sure if we sent Tony a photo of that, but could you, I have seen this in action as well, as you know, Bill, because I'll send you sometimes. I have gray foxes in my backyard. I don't see them because I live really rurally. Once in a while I'll see them, but most of the time I'm getting them on camera. And you were the one that taught me about the fox kiss. So could you tell folks this is a real behavior, aside from being cute, has some real significance to foxes?
Oh yeah. Well, it's you when two foxes meet, and it's usually a younger fox to an older fox. Okay, they will touch noses, or they'll lick the sides of their cheek, and it's a greeting. Okay, couple that kind of a greeting with a tail that swishes across the ground in big arcs. Okay, that's happiness being expressed there. So when Fox comes up to, let's say, Dark, the alpha male, and gives Dark a fox kiss, uh, and swishes that tail back and forth, you know that fox is feeling happy about being able to meet this other fox. It's a greeting. It's a saying, I acknowledge you. I know your position. And that gets into the hierarchy of the fox world. And how that hierarchy gets built is a fascinating observation. And it's all based on food.
Oh, interesting. So on food, who provides it, or?
No, what it comes down to is that in the beginning, when the pups are really small, but they're able to eat meat, okay, mom or dad will bring in a squirrel and just toss it out there, or a rabbit and just toss it out there, and the young ones will just jump on it from all sides. But there's always one or two that will get the biggest piece and take it away off to the side. Okay, more and more and more as they get older and older. That those one or two foxes, they become the alpha fox of the family. Okay, and so it's out of that tug of war of the meat, the food, that builds the hierarchy. The one that is weakest, the one that doesn't do as good a job on it, becomes the omega of the hierarchy. And that's the way it's all played out. And so food is the foundation for creating the hierarchy.
And Bill, one thing I want to be sure we touch on, I know we're getting close to time, but I mean, again, just so much I've learned from you about the urban foxes, especially. But one behavior that always fascinated me that you kind of uncovered as well is, we get back to, again, rural foxes are a little more shyer. But you noticed what the urban foxes you study would do is actually introduce their young to you, right? And, they see people as part of the landscape and behave a little differently. But that introducing of their young to almost like you'd introduce a neighborhood kid to just be like, yeah, this is mine. Nice to see you. But can you talk about that for a second?
Well, I'll tell you the first time that ever happened. Okay, there was this pair of foxes. The male was the fox I called Squat. Okay, because he would go 10, 20 feet and squat and mark 10, 20 feet and mark, and Squat became the alpha male of this one region out there. Okay, and Squat, when he was growing up, became really comfortable with me. He'd come out onto the road, and while I was sitting there documenting all of this events were going on out there, and he'd come out in the middle of the road, and then he'd dash back. Well, when he grew up to be an adult, he took over the landscape. He took over the den. He took over everything out there. Had a mate, and gave birth. They had that year 5 pups. One of those pups was Bold. I called her Bold because that little fox at first just hid back in the bushes. One day, Squat was out at the edge of the brush, and he was just sitting there, and I was just observing him. And every once in a while, he'd turn and he'd look back into the brush. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there's something back there, probably is. And in a few minutes, this little pup comes out.
Oh.
Gives dad a fox kiss, and then looks at me. Well, since dad was sitting there comfortably with me across the road from him, it must be okay, right? And so after, I don't know, maybe a couple months, there's a fox kiss.
There's a fox kiss. Good job, Tony.
So after a while, what happens is that I on this particular day, I was standing taking notes instead of sitting, and she Bold came all the way over to my boot and sniffed my boot and then ran back across the road to the brush. And I mean, that was the first time that ever happened. But see,
Wow.
her father had introduced her to me. And that direct introduction was why Bold felt comfortable.
With you.
Yeah, with me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's amazing. I find that too with another animal I study, the pika. They live 3 to 4 years, but they know me season to season. They definitely sort of, oh yeah, it's the blonde chick who sits there and looks at us. So again, I think there is almost that. We don't have it so much in the US, but you watch all those like Pride and Prejudice movies where you have to facilitate introductions and stuff. I think the animal world still has that a little bit where we don't. So I love that story, Bill. Hey, before we leave, I do want to get at how people can help in a couple ways. First of all, if you are living in a space, whether it be urban or rural, with gray foxes, what can you do to ensure that they're successful? For me, as people, we have some responsibility. And Armando, thank you, has a question sort of in this area about, do you see urban sources of food, garbage, orchards, etc., as beneficial or harmful to gray foxes? So I know, my other coexistence work, we always tell people, secure your garbage, don't leave pet food out. But how can people, especially in these urban areas, Bill, what can they do to ensure that the foxes are successful and stay healthy and coexist?
Whoa, what a question. I would say if they're in your neighborhood, in your direct in your backyard, let them be and just observe them, because most of the time what they'll do is if they're alone in your backyard, then they will come and go. Okay, if they might also, a pair might want to build their den under your deck. That's a possibility too. And I saw, I don't remember who it was, but no poisons.
Yes, no poisons. Exactly.
Yeah,
Christine, thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
do not use rat poison.
yeah, that's right. If you need rodent control, the gray fox is your prime rodent controller, and it will take care of any rat population that needs to be taken care of. Or get yourself a owl box and put it up in your backyard and let the owls do the work, because the owls will, on the average, they'll devour 4 to 6 rodents per night. Okay, that's more than any of that poison is going to do.
Right.
So you've got an owl is a better rodent controller than any poison that you can put out.
And you're right. My backyard foxes, I get them on my wildlife cameras. They are good rodent control. They definitely keep it under control. But yeah, I think these are all really good tips. And I just want to stress it really, especially wildlife in these urban interfaces, but wildlife everywhere. We have to help them be successful. And I think it is, it's wrong to blame a bear for getting into someone's garbage. The bear is just being a bear, right? He has to consume calories. So, let's do what we can to ensure that there is less conflict. But hey, let's, Bill, I will give you the last word before we go. And I want to ask you the last question. But before that, again, please, you won't be disappointed. We thank everybody for tuning in. This is an amazing book. Bill is an amazing man. I've, again, learned so much, and he's really taught the world a lot about urban gray foxes and their behavior. And I think it's because of your approach, Bill, and really trying to understand and not dominate or study in the traditional sense. But let me leave you with this question to answer, Bill. What do you love most about these foxes?
What do I love most?
Yeah.
It's got to be that that they're just great little animals that somehow I need to know more about all the time, because they bring up more and more and more questions all, as I work with them more. I don't know how else to explain that.
Your fascination with them has led to so much, though, and I think there's, in trying to understand them, I don't know, have you understood yourself better, maybe? Is that something that's resonated?
Yeah. Along those lines, understanding these gray foxes have pushed me to become a vegetarian. Well, I'm not a complete vegetarian. I'm working on it.
Go.
But I'll tell you, until before I met the foxes and began to understand that they are sentient beings, I ate steaks and all kinds of things like that, and pork and so forth. I don't anymore,
Yeah.
because that's I can't do that. I can't. Now I look upon it as being murder when you kill an animal like that. Now, there are times when people, like my friend Bob up in Montana, he lives 20 miles back in the wilderness. He has to kill an elk once a year in order to make it through the winter. That's his way. And before he does, he has ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
So he is respectful of the spirit of the elk.
Yep. And I've been vegan for 6 years now. And I do think as we learn more and more about, again, the intelligence and rich emotional lives of these animals, it does get harder. But I think, like you said, there are, traditions where that respect and I think, is what we've lost so much, I think, with the industrial, farming and eating of meat and stuff. So I think it's something to get back to. But what I encourage everybody to do is do what Bill did. It doesn't have to be a fox. Again, for me, watching butterflies intently has taught me a lot. Pick an animal in your backyard. I think one of the things through the pandemic is how many people got to know their backyard birds or squirrels. But really, taking a deep dive like Bill into an animal's life and animals that you can observe every day, the rewards are high. And for Bill, the rewards are not just something that brings joy to him and others, but also has led to this incredible book and to the incredible results of your research, Bill.
Yeah.
So folks, please buy the book and please go to his website. And Bill, go ahead. I'll give you the last word. What do you want to leave people with?
All of the proceeds from that book are going to go into the Urban Wildlife Research Project. Okay.
Awesome.
Donating it to that. Because we need that foundation. And if you want to donate to our cause and what we're doing, you can go on to our website, the Urban Wildlife Research Project.com, and make a donation through that portal. We have it right up there.
Please donate. Bill, literally, he is not funded by anybody. He started this work on his own. He funds it himself. Again, just doing amazing stuff to further our understanding of foxes and how we can live with them better in our urban spaces. So thank you, Bill. And
thank you, Beth.
Joy to talk with you. Thanks, everybody, for spending time with us. And please follow Bill on Facebook. Go to urbanwildliferesearchproject.com. Get involved. And again, Bill, thanks for telling us what the fox says. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.